Do you want to figure out how to turn your partner from nagging, complaining, and not sleeping with you to softening, being enjoyable to be around, and wanting to have sex with you all the time? Well, in this episode, we are going to cover the 3 foundational steps required to make this very change. Welcome back to The Naked Connection. This is the show that supports driven men to reach sexual mastery and build deep connections. It's your girl, Kirsten, and today we are covering masculine relationships, blah. Welcome back to The Naked Connection. This is the show that supports driven men to reach sexual mastery and build deep connections. It's Kirsten, and today we are covering masculine leadership in a relationship. To have this conversation, I am joined by GS Youngblood. GS shows men how to repair their relationships by living from your masculine core. GS works with men to really help them no longer settle for a flat or toxic relationship, but instead actually have the power to repair your relationship and start thriving. I cannot wait to dive into this. You guys, let's get some. GS Youngblood, welcome to The Naked Connection. Happy to have you here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Kirsten. This is great. I'm looking forward to this.
I am as well. And kicking things off right away, I know that from your work, you have really developed what you call the masculine blueprint. And we're going to dive into so much of that today and looking at leadership, relationships, sex. But I'm wondering, just so that everyone understands right from the start, if you could share what that's all about.
The blueprint, yeah, that's really the framework that I'm using as a lens for all the teachings that I'm offering men. And my contention is this. I've got a framework that defines what I would say is a modern definition of what masculine means. And I think that's a big question in the world. Like, what is masculine? And of course, there's a lot of association with toxic masculine. And I'm trying to create another definition of a modern masculine. And that's where the blueprint comes from. And it's a 3-part framework. And the first part is about being more grounded. I call it respond versus react. And it's that quality of a man who there's a certain stillness to him. There's a choicefulness and not a non-engagement, but a non-reactivity. Like, this is a guy that contemplates what he wants to do and lives more out of his intention. And so that's what I call respond versus react. And it's the first element of the blueprint. The second element is provide structure. And this is about bringing leadership into the relationship. And it doesn't mean you're the only leader. You're not the leader, but you are bringing more leadership into your logistical life every day. You're bringing leadership into your sexual life, which I'm sure we'll talk about, and bringing leadership into the emotional link between you and your partner. And so all of that is what consists of the provide structure, which is the second element of the blueprint. And then the third element is create safety. And what we're talking about is physical, financial, and emotional safety. In my book, I probably talk mostly about emotional safety because it's one of the biggest complaints of women in relationship is they don't feel that safety with their man because he's not making space for her emotions. He's not doing the things that build emotional connection, usually because he doesn't know how. And so that's the third element of the blueprint, which is create safety and connection. And so my contention is this, like, it doesn't matter how tall or smart or good looking or wealthy or anything like that you are, any man can embody the blueprint and by just simply embodying each of those 3 elements. And so that's the masculine blueprint.
Mm-hmm. And so thanks for breaking all 3 of those down. Is there, just to understand, let's say that someone steps into embodying these 3 elements. So I just want to make sure I have them right because we had grounding, leading, and creating safety.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so if a man is able to step into that, what happens as a result? Like, how would his relationship with his woman change?
Well, let's say something flares up between the 2 of them. which, is an inevitable part of relationship. When he's grounded, he's going to be less reactive to when she comes with a complaint, and he's going to be less likely to do what most men do, which is go defensive and start to explain why he did what he did and explain why she shouldn't feel the way she feels. He doesn't need to do that. I mean, the reason we do that is because we're full of anxiety and we're trying to get that anxiety to stop. And so when he has a grounded nervous system, he's first of all, he's going to be able to actually just stay, be present, and make space for what it is that she's bringing to the table. Um, in that same scenario in leadership, he's going to take emotional leadership and he's going to say, you know what, baby, we need to work this out, and so let's sit down tonight and let's talk about this. Let's have a weekly relationship meeting. Let's get into couples therapy. Like, he's taking the lead to kind of bring them out of the dark place they may have gone into, and because he's making space, because he's engaged in the process, and because he's open um, to her feelings that she's expressing to him, she's going to have that the net effect is going to be emotional safety. And so that's how it actually manifests even in the most, mundane of examples in a relationship.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And in like a really practical application to get a gauge on that, I think
Mhm.
what's coming up in my mind in this moment is knowing that when I've had conversations kind of in the same realm before, or just in general about like the actions that a man might be interested in taking to support the relationship, some of the comments that I've received or feedback that I've gotten is like this thought of like, that feels like so much work, or like, why do I have to do quote unquote everything?
Yeah.
And I'm super curious about what you think of that.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because I get that one too. Like, why am I to be the only one?
Yeah.
Well, this is what I say. Look, this is how I coach men. I'm going to put all the burden on your shoulders, because the minute that you start like demanding that she change so that things get better, like she's the first one to make the first move, that's when you stop actually looking at yourself and what you can bring to the table. And what I try to get guys to understand is that, if we're talking about the energy of the feminine and the masculine, the feminine as an energetic concept is more their way of being is kind of very much often a reaction to our way of being, or a result. We actually, through our way of being, we evoke a lot of the behavior in our feminine partner. And I tell guys, that doesn't mean that you have to do all the work. That means you're actually very powerful, because you don't have to hope and pray that she's going to change. You actually just need to bring something different, and you're going to evoke something different in her. And I've seen it over and over and again with guys that are like, man, my woman she's just a bitch to me all the time. And then we dig into how he handles her emotions, how he conducts himself, how reliable is he. And I can see, I'm like, you are evoking that behavior in her. And because you've been doing it for years, it's gotten pretty chronic. So it seems like it's her. But if we can actually work on some of the ways that you're showing up in the relationship, you'll evoke something different from her. So instead of like, why me, which is what you initially presented, I try to get guys to understand you got all the power here in terms of improving the dynamic of the relationship, because you just need to bring something different. She'll organically start to shift her way of being in response to that. So
Mm.
that's what I tell guys on that topic.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. I think, there's a lot of, you kind of mentioned this one of like a woman being bitchy or like a partner nagging.
Mm-hmm.
And just knowing that that can be sometimes, or like a really critical partner trying to like do all of those sorts of behaviors to change someone or get what they want in a different, maybe in a manner that isn't so desirable for a man. You know, like what can be actually be done in that space to start changing that? If a man is like, okay, this is my experience with my partner, I want to start creating that change. Like, how do they start that
Yeah.
change?
Well, I always say the first step is to ground your nervous system. And anytime I start working with a guy, I'm trying to get him to have a daily embodiment practice. And embodiment is this school of thought around exercises that involve breathing, meditation, movement, visualization, in ways that bring more of your awareness away from kind of your thinking mind that usually gets you in trouble, and more into the body, so you're more here and more now. That's the first thing that guys have to do. Everything else kind of rolls out from there. That's the foundation. So it's just like building a house. The analogy is that you've got to have a pretty strong foundation before you put a house on it, no matter how pretty that house is. And that holds as well for grounding the nervous system. Because once you do that, you experience less of that anxiety, and then you do less of that kind of frantic trying to make it go away or make it stop thing that guys often do. And they can actually rest in the fire a little bit and receive her pain. They can feel her pain. They can receive her pain, and then respond in a much more connected, present, engaging way. rather than their old habit, which is either to shut down and go stony or get defensive and start explaining why his feminine partner shouldn't feel the way she feels, which is always a recipe for disaster. Um, so yeah, that's always the first step is to really start to get more grounded.
Mm. This is interesting. I think even in this space, I know we're talking about romantic relationships, but I think even in just any kind of dynamic, really, whether it's like a business exchange or interpersonal, like friends, family, whenever someone, at least from my experience, is like slower and
Mm-hmm.
calmer, like
Mm-hmm.
it almost seems like everyone turns to them and is listening and is aware, and it just feels so different.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. I tell that to guys all the time. I mean, some of my clients, their motor's just going so fast. I'm like, dude, you're going so fast. It's hard to feel close to you. I can imagine that your feminine partner, probably your friends too, actually kind of suffer around you because it's hard to feel close to you because you're moving that fast. And what you pointed to, that where everybody turns towards them,
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about co-regulation. Our nervous systems, I mean, we're not all just completely sentient beings. There's some connection at an unseen level between all of us. So if I'm jacked up, just you being in my presence, it tends to jack your nervous system up too, unless you've got a highly developed practice of your own. But the average person's going to get jacked up versus if I'm totally grounded, I actually serve as a grounding rod for you, and your nervous system starts to come down. And so yeah, you meet a person like that, they're actually making you feel more calm. And guess what? We actually like to be around people that make us feel calm. We don't always enjoy being around people that kind of jack us up.
Mm-hmm.
So that it's that co-regulation aspect that happens even if you're not trying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I this is making me think about I had a partner who we were in an exchange once, kind of like moving through a conflict, and I was getting emotional, and he was able to just like hold me and get quiet and do nothing. And like I mean, not like he was doing nothing, but like in that the stillness, I calmed down
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
quickly. And it was like, oh, as a woman, I was like, oh, wait, what's happening here? Like,
Yeah. I like this.
and I like this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that story, by the way. And I think that we would be smart to point out the art of this for guys. So we're not telling them to go totally like completely still,
Mm.
because what happens is that occurs as a non-engagement to the other person. And so it's not stony, it's not still, even if you're available, if you're a little too still. So I one of the things I learned from a guy named Stan Tatkin was around signaling. So in your calmness while you're grounding the other person, give them signals that you're with them, whatever those signals are. And I think that's the real art for guys, is to be still but engaged.
Ah, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm thinking of in this moment, like he has said, like, come here, I'm gonna hold you, and was like checking in,
Mm.
and like throughout, just a couple of moments, but it really was interesting how quickly him being present with me and just being there shifted everything for us.
Yeah, yeah. I had a along the same lines. My girlfriend over the weekend I forgot, she was doing something on the computer. It always stresses her out. And she just was asking me questions, trying to get my help on something, and I could just feel her getting more and more ratcheted up, and it had nothing to do with me. And so at some point I just stopped helping, and I just turned to her and I said, "Sweetie, I can feel this is hard for you." And I just pulled her into me, and then she was able to just calm down, and then we could continue, and she was much less jacked up, which obviously made it easier for me to help her when she was less jacked up. So yeah, that's a gift that we can give to each other, is to help ground each other.
I think you mentioned this piece about like defining masculinity and how that is almost, I don't know, it feels to me like it's almost become like a buzz term, but also like no one really knows how to define it today. Like, where do you sit in that with your clients, with men?
You mean in defining what masculinity is?
Yeah.
Well, I think the blueprint is my answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
It was like guys just we want to paint, we want to connect the dots, paint by numbers. They're like, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. You
Mm-hmm.
want me to run through that wall? I'll run through it if it gets me to where I want to go, which is either to be more masculine or to have a better relationship. And so the blueprint is not easy, but it is paint by numbers. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's my contention. If you show up and you're more grounded, a la what we just discussed for the last few minutes, if you have clarity and then you bring structure and directionality to the moment, and there's lots of ways that we can talk about how to do that. And if you're attuned to your partner and helping keep her safe and feeling connected to you, doing the things to build emotional connection, you do those three things, I guarantee you will show up more powerfully in the world as a man.
Mm-hmm.
Guarantee it.
Mm-hmm.
And those things can, as you heard me say earlier, any guy can do that. It's not the purview of the guy that's big or wealthy or clever or good looking. It's not just that. Any man can embody these traits and be more in their masculine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. One piece about this is I think that a lot of men have struggle with saying no. I know you've done some work in working with men that might be classified as like nice guys. And for everyone that's listening, we had Dr. Robert Glover on the show recently who did a whole episode on that kind of topic. But I know that this like piece of stepping really into setting boundaries can feel challenging, or like, oh, if I say no, or if I set this boundary with my partner, that she's going to think I'm being controlling or manipulative or what have you. So then like nothing gets set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the question even is unspoken. I get it. Yeah. And I'm glad you had Dr. Glover on, one of my very good friends, and definitely the father of all nice guy, behavior. And he was the one that really first codified that. Yeah. I mean, what happens is inside a guy, let's say, your woman presents you with some conundrum that might require you to say no, but you're scared to, and you're going to go the nice guy route. What's happening inside is it's touching something from way back. Usually that's just usually where this comes from, somewhere where you felt maybe powerless or helpless, or somebody had power over you. And as in your younger years, you did what it took to survive as usually as a child who does not have any power. You adapted, and you adapt by hiding your needs. And so you take that same child and grow them into an adult. And sadly and weirdly, we still exhibit that behavior. We somehow perceive there's like a power differential, or that we feel a little helpless, even when we're really not. It can still kind of feel like that. It can feel like we're 6 years old again. And okay, now I'm helpless. Now I don't feel like I've got any power in this situation. So I'm just going to repeat that behavior. I'm just going to hide my needs, pretend that I'm good to go, and then just I'll go into the back room and seethe in resentment, which is always the unfortunate outcome of hiding your needs. And what's happening in that moment is that anxiety is rising in you because of your helplessness. And then anxiety is not comfortable. And so you're going to do anything to make that discomfort stop. And usually that means hiding your needs, giving in to the other person, being agreeable, all those things. And so, with guys, I say, okay, we got to tame this dynamic. So one, you got to do the embodiment work to really kind of just ground your nervous system, so you're more robust to the discomfort that arises. And then one of the things I really teach guys is you've got to be unafraid to lose her, is how I phrase it. And when I say lose her, I mean, there's quotes around the term lose, like lose her as a girlfriend, lose her approval, lose her satisfaction with you in the moment. You've got to be okay with upsetting the apple cart. And so that specific piece of the dynamic is something that we work on. And we'll scenario kind of not role play, but we'll run scenarios. Okay, what happened? What would happen? What would she say if you had to set a boundary? And so we work on that dynamic where they're a little less afraid of the consequences they think are going to happen, but usually aren't actually going to happen. And so those are a couple of the ways that I work with guys to kind of get them out of that nice guy dynamic where they just hide their needs and go agreeable with everybody else.
We so often think the worst is going to happen, or like make an assumption that, oh, if in this case, if I express what it is that I actually need, or I set a boundary that is really important to me, the worst case maybe is like I could lose this person. And so because of that fear of this potential worst case scenario, nothing then happens.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, it's a sad but very, very common dynamic. Unfortunately, one of the things that causes nice guy behavior is what I would refer to as a lack of clarity, inner clarity. And part of the problem with the nice guys is here's their radar and it's pointed outwards. And so the nice guy has his radar outwards and he's looking for danger, relational danger, and he's looking for the safe path of what to do or what to say. So he's always scanning, even if he hides it well, he's always just on his radar's on 11 pointed outward. He has no inner clarity. And so when you don't actually know who you are, what you need, what you want, what your boundaries, preferences, et cetera are, if you've never really had that radar looking in, like, of course, you can't not be a nice guy because there's no you to actually hold on to. There's no inner truth about what you need and want. And so if your girlfriend is like, you just, maybe she's mad that you don't make enough money or something, and she makes a snide comment, and you're just, you're kind of an underachieving loser or something like that. The guy that's got some of his radar turned in and to really evaluate what's going on inside, he's going to pause for a second and be like, ouch, like that was a shitty thing to say. And I guess the more I think about it, like, I don't really want to be in a relationship where we treat each other like that. And so, you know what, babe, boundary at name calling like that. If you're going to name call, I'm going to pop out of the conversation and I want nothing more to do with it, because that's not how I want to be in relationship. So with that radar turned in, he can actually feel the ouch, because with his radar turned out, he just feels the shame and shuts it down real quick and doesn't come into any relationship with that, what's going on inside. And so when you turn that radar in, you understand yourself better, and then you can verbalize it. Ouch, that actually didn't feel good to call me a name like that, which is a much more powerful, vulnerable way to be in a relationship, when you can actually say things like ouch and yeah, that doesn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all about knowing yourself that allows you to have these boundaries with other people.
Yeah, and I think that most women find that attractive.
Yeah, they do. The vulnerability they find attractive, the spine they find attractive, the calling her out, because she probably knows she shouldn't have said that. Most people, aren't actual true assholes. They're just having a bad moment and they call a name, but they don't want to be like that. And so they actually like to be called out in a lot of cases, not every case, but in a lot of cases.
And so you mentioned in the part about how someone that might be like not be in a nice guy state is like scanning the environment for really his safety, it sounds like. And I know you mentioned that the third piece of this blueprint is about creating safety, particularly emotional safety. So what kind of actions does that look like for a man to take to build emotional safety with a woman? Because I think that that's so important. So important.
Oh, it's I mean, it's a vast understatement that it's so important. It's just foundational, really. And I before I answer the question, I'll just say, at the more meta level, guys come in and they're telling me about their wife or girlfriend and, her bad behavior. But it's clear that there's just no emotional connection between the two. Like, I can tell the guy doesn't feel very deeply, and he can't feel what's going on inside of him. He sure as hell can't feel what's inside of her. He doesn't know how to foster that connection. So of course she's cranky all the time. Of course she doesn't want to be sexual with you. A lot of guys come in, they're like, how do I get my wife to want to have more sex with me? And I'm like, not by looking at the symptom. You got to go look at the cause. And so, yeah, lack of emotional connection and safety it's I won't say almost always, but it's more often than not the cause of what's wrong in the relationship. And so your question was, okay, well, how does a guy build emotional connection? And it's never easy, but it is in some ways straightforward to describe. And I think the two biggest components of building connection are: know how to feel deeply as a man, know how to feel deeply, and then share some part of your inner self, your inner experience with your woman. Don't always be just kind of a blank wall of non-emotionality. So you got to learn to share from a deeper place to her, so she really knows you and what's going on inside of you. That's one. And then receive her state cleanly. And what that means is, with the feminine, the expression tends to be, we're not making absolutes or black and white here, but it tends to be, at the emotional level, it's going to be a little less organized, a little bit more chaotic, a little bit more, just Receive that cleanly, which means you're grounded. You have a sense of yourself. You're not going to crumple the minute she's got one complaint, and you're making space for whatever comes up. Now, that doesn't mean you tolerate abuse, like a la what we talked about with the name calling. So it doesn't mean that. But short of that, you can hold whatever comes out, even if a little bit it's directed at you, which it often will be. So it's about, can I feel and share more deeply to her, and then can I receive what's actually going on in her more cleanly and hold it, and can I see behind the words to what she's really feeling and kind of feel that with her? Because I don't know a woman alive that doesn't want to feel their man feeling her. When she feels emotional, she wants to feel her man feeling her. That's not the only thing she wants, but that's part of it, is like, not just, oh yeah, baby, I understand, like that, not that he just gets it at a mental level, but he's like, oh, wow, yeah, I get that, baby. She can feel him feeling it with her. And because what's happening is often with the feminine expression, she's in some kind of distress. So when he comes and joins her in that whatever emotional field she's in, she actually feels joined. And that's something that actually feels really good to all humans. And I think the feminine even more, is just to feel joined temporarily in your pain and distress. Because pain and distress and anxiety and trauma, they're all pretty lonely feelings when you have to go through it by yourself. So to be joined in your distress is very regulating and very powerful. So that's all part of receiving your woman's state. And so you do those two things, you're going to build emotional connection. Now there's lots more to it, but those are kind of the two building blocks that I know of.
So when you're talking about like the poof explosion part of like a woman's emotional experience, or just an expression in general, there's this part of me that's like, ooh, I don't like that is like what we are giving. And I'm curious to know, like, from your experience of working with men and like seeing how their relationships transform the more that they're able to kind of create this space of emotional connection, does that ever shift? Like, does that soften? Like, the more a woman knows that, oh, if this is what I'm feeling and my partner's able to meet me in this place, that I'm just wondering if that changes.
Yes. Yeah, it does shift. Yeah, I mean, most of my clients' wives and girlfriends feel very lonely when they came to me, they felt very lonely in the relationship because they had to do it all themselves, and they didn't feel like their partner really got them, understood them, felt them, let them in, were responsive to their complaints and needs. So they feel alone in it, and then they just get louder.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, when the guy starts to engage and hold space and be grounded and co-regulates and a few other things, she feels less alone. She feels like she's not having to just pound on him to get her to open up and wake up. And things usually change a lot. Now, there's one more point I want to make on this, the poof that kind of got you there for a second. I think what I tell guys is like, look, men, here's something you need to understand. If her expression is this big, probably the majority of that is actually historic. It's all the other men in her life that mistreated her in some way, whether they actively mistreated or just neglected. So you're getting the father wound, you're getting the brother wound, you're getting all, 10 ex-boyfriends or whatever, all the ways. Somehow the pain that she feels, that when none of those men took responsibility for it, it got frozen in her. So it's still present. So the past is in the present in that way. And when these emotional wounds get frozen into our psyche because nobody ever took responsibility for them. So I say, men, look, probably, 7 out of 10 parts of the intensity of her is probably historic. And the 3/10 is what goofy non-relational thing you did. So she's going to come at you with a level 10. Don't feel like you got to swallow all that. It's all new. Just have a deep sense of knowing that some of that is historic because no man ever took responsibility for his actions with her. And just own the 30%. Own the thing that you actually did, not the whole expression. And then what you'll find is that the whole thing comes down. So I've always tell men, find the kernel of truth and where she might be blaming you with a lot of intensity that maybe you're like, why is she so mad? Why is she so mad? This thing's not that big a deal. Well, it's because it's not just this thing. It's her whole history. So I try to get guys to, find the part that's real, own that piece. And when you take responsibility for your piece and just your piece, all the rest of it kind of tends to deflate and calm down. Works almost every time.
And I would imagine, you're saying like, oh, that she's bringing all of her father wound, her brother wound, the ex-boyfriends. And then that's also being met with a man's history of the mother wound and his ex-girlfriends and all of that.
Yeah.
So it's like a big party in the relationship coming together.
Yeah, I think the difference, it's not exactly symmetric. I think part of our dysfunction is you guys tend to communicate on the level of emotion more, and we communicate on the level of information. I think everybody sort of agrees with that. And so you're coming with something that's not meant to totally be literal, but we're like, no, wait a minute. That thing you said about, I didn't say it exactly like that. We go to the facts. And I think that's where there's maybe a little bit of an asymmetry in our dynamic is we try to translate your emotional expression into facts. We try to reconcile it with the facts, and that doesn't go well. It goes really poorly almost every time because one, you never get anywhere, and two, you feel very unseen in that. So that's one of the biggest differences between the masculine and the feminine.
I'm wondering, and I know we talk about sex on this podcast quite a bit, about how stepping into these three really core elements that you've described, like how that shows up in sex.
Strongly, I'll say strongly. And let's use the blueprint and let's imagine a sexual situation where the man and the woman, they're in the bedroom, and they kind of, for whatever reason, have agreed that they're going to be sexual. So that's we know that's going to happen. And, maybe she's standing by the bed and a lot of guys, we get very excited when our woman wants to have sex with us. And if maybe a guy who's on the younger end of his arc and, he's just going to kind of walk up to her and just like immediately start kissing her and kind of just try to jump right in. And, what I want guys is to slow down. We talked about slowing down earlier we talked about slowing down. I want him to be able to slow down and approach her slowly with strong eye contact and stop in front of her. And he's just going to pause. He's going to come into the moment with her, and he's going to feel her breath. He's going to slow his own breath. He's going to be in eye contact with her. He's going to be feeling into her heart. And then the way that he engages is going to be very choice. He's not going to just start pawing her and grabbing her boobs and, just pawing at her. I'm sure that, every woman has had at least one lover just kind of pawed at her like a teenager. And so whatever he does next is going to be chosen. It might be a little slower. And this doesn't mean that it's always like this. Sometimes there's a place for like, just pick her ass up over your shoulder and carry her to the bedroom. Like there is a place for that. We'll talk about that in a second. But here it's like establishing some connection, some union. And he does that because he's got a grounded nervous system. He's slowed down and he's very choiceful. Mm-hmm. So that's where the grounding can really come into play, rather than being in his head of like, what am I supposed to do next? And then leadership, I talk lots about sexual leadership, and this is about initiating. This is about creating variety. This is about becoming a little bit more directional and maybe even dominant, if that's what you guys are both wanting to do, and leading the action. That comes through both his affect and his actions. And so, his actions could be the way that he physically interacts with her body, whether it be the way he touch her or maybe restrain her, like just gently pin that wrist behind her sacrum or, whatever it is. So he's working with her body. So he's exercising physical control, whether it's kind of restraining her or moving her. In that is obviously a big element of leadership, but there's also a huge element of something I haven't talked about yet, is attunement. You can't just go and, move your woman's body around without being super attuned to her state to make sure you're not hurting her, make sure it feels good. And so you've got a little bit of your awareness tracking her while you lead the action moment to moment. And so there's this whole, he can take leadership through physical control. There's a way that you can lead in the bedroom through stimulating her mentally. And often this is about erotic talk, or dirty talk is maybe what some people will call it. But being able to use your words to stimulate her mind and create arousal. And then there's the command element of that, of command of like, come here. Now turn around, and where you're commanding her, and you've got to have not only the words but also the energetics of that, because you can't do it with kind of a goofy, high pitched voice. It's not going to work. You got to be grounded and come from a deeper place. And so that mental stimulation and command, those are all other aspects of leadership in the bedroom. And all of this is what we worked on. I told you earlier, I did a workshop down in Santa Cruz back in October about this. We had 18 guys that went through this workshop, and we worked on command and erotic talk, but mostly the energetics of how to show up super grounded and still and choiceful. Anyway, so that's the leadership aspect of this. And then the create safety is just, I think, you want to have the dark, and I think a lot of things I just described are more in the camp of the dark, but you also want to have the light. There's time and place for all dark for a little while, but for the most part, I think most women that I know want that artful combination of the dark and the light. So there's got to be heart involved. There's got to be attunement and tracking her so she's safe, and that's the safety element of this. And so that's something that I want guys who are trying to be more dominant or directional or leadership in the bedroom. You got to keep her safe too, and you got to bring the light. And when you can, artfully merge those two, then I say you are the most attractive man that you can become when you learn to merge the dark and the light. All right, I just talked a lot, so I'm going to pause there.
I'm like, this is amazing. Keep going. Yeah, there's so much in this, and a couple of places I want to go, but to touch on that element of attunement, because I think that is something that is really valuable. It's like kind of like a superpower of being able to be in your experience and also still be aware and connected with what is unfolding for your woman. And yeah, I think especially, the slowing down, I imagine, helps increase the attunement, because just from understanding experiences, like when things are happening really fast, it can be hard to recognize what's actually going on for the other person.
Yeah.
Do you have any other insight on how to improve that part of this leadership?
You mean the slowing down piece?
Of the attunement piece of like being able to be aware while still being in yourself and like enjoying the experience yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a lot of men's work is around awareness training. It's like, where does my awareness go? And if you're take your woman out to dinner downtown San Francisco and, you're walking back to the car or whatever, as a man, part of your masculine persona is as a protector. And so you want your awareness, you want to be with her and you're chatting and having fun, but part of your awareness is wide and looking for any signs of danger. And so that's just one of many examples around a guy in his masculine core knows where and when to put his awareness. This is no different. What you're asking is like, how do I attune to her? And it comes down to, you're having sex. And so guys, I empathize with you. I know you're excited. I get excited too, but don't lose yourself in it. Don't lose yourself in the pleasure, your own pleasure or her pleasure or the action. You always have to be tracking. So even while you're doing whatever you're doing to or with her, a little bit of that awareness has to be checking her. You watch her face and you can see, does her breath kind of like maybe there's a quick in-breath or she winces in pain and you just catch it. It's just like that. And a lot of women will suck it up, not to their benefit, but they'll suck it up because they don't want to, you're having sex and they don't want to upset the apple cart. So a lot of women won't say either ouch or, hey, that's not feeling good. They'll just kind of go along and tolerate. But you're the masterful lover when you can notice that and go, baby, I noticed something. Are you okay? And she's going to be, well, thanks. Yeah, actually, that's not feeling good. Can you actually angle down a little bit more? Oh, that's it right there. Mm-hmm. And so, if you can actually be the one that's catching that, even when she's not even allowing herself to stand up for herself in that moment, like that, she's gonna just melt in a feeling of safety around you. So again, it's about being dedicated to not losing yourself in your pleasure or her pleasure or the action, and
Mhm.
just reserve a little bit your awareness just to watch her pleasure.
Mhm.
And it's not just, by the way, looking out for like the way you hurt her. It's not just the negative. You
Mhm.
can use it as a like a like a guided missile. Oh, that's a terrible analogy. You can use it to continually calibrate how you're pleasuring her. So if you're going down on her, don't just like have your eyes down, like, cast your eyes up and check out and listen. Where does she moan more when I do this? And when does she moan less when I do that, kind of thing? And so you're tracking. So you're both looking for the bad or the ouches, but you're also guiding your pleasure to really up level.
Mhm.
And that's the man that can just save 10% of his awareness for that is going to be a more masterful lover.
You mentioned the piece about like men being like, why doesn't my partner want to have sex with me anymore? Like, why does my
Right.
wife want to sleep with me? And there are obviously all of these elements outside of what's happening in the bedroom, but also like what you were just describing. I mean, I think a lot of women would be like, I want that. And so
Yeah.
looking at what is actually unfolding in the bedroom can be really, really helpful to increase some of that frequency and improve the connection overall.
Yeah, it's amazing how guys don't realize part of what you just said, which is so much of your sexuality is determined by what's happening outside the bedroom. They don't
Mhm.
realize that. They just think she's being like frigid or recalcitrant or,
Mhm.
whatever, just being difficult. But I mean, so much of your sexuality is just an outgrowth of what's actually going on in the rest of the relationship.
Mhm.
And also, I think if I understood you correctly, you also talked about the reverse, where the sexuality can influence how the outside the bedroom is. And I know for men, I'm going to give this. I know your audience is mostly men, but for the ladies listening, like, and if I hope you already knew this, but when you initiate or express your desire to be sexual with us, we feel loved. Just like when we open to you and are vulnerable and heart connected with you, you feel loved. And of course, it's not just black and white like that, but there's a pretty strong inverse corollary there. And so for us, when we aren't sexual, we start to get crankier and less well behaved, and more dysfunctional in our relationality. And so you know, sex is an outgrowth of what's outside, and it's also an influencer of what's outside the bedroom.
There's like a different types of sex and a time and a place for different, people to lead. And just I'm
Hmm.
curious, let's say that a man is like, I lead all day. I have a team that I'm leading or a business or I go to work and I'm a manager and I just come home and I don't want to have to like lead again.
Yeah.
And even in thinking about sex too, of like, okay, it would be so nice if she would lead in this space. I'm curious of what your take is on some of this dynamic, if that's unfolding.
I get it.
Mhm.
And I would say this to men. Um, your wife is not there at work with you. She's not part of your company. She doesn't sit in the cubicle next to you. She's not there and experiencing all the leadership that you bring. So I get that you're tapped out, but you go home and you go into the relationship bubble. And if you don't bring some leadership, particularly in the sexual arena, you're not going to have polarity in your relationship. So men, find the ways to recharge yourself so that you can come home um, and bring some requisite amount of leadership into your life with your woman. That's part one. Figure it out, guys. Um, Part two is, and at the same time, you express to your woman. I've expressed this to my woman. I'm like, baby, when you initiate once in a while, because I'm usually the one that probably initiates 80% of the time, I would say. When you initiate, I feel so loved. It feels so easy to me because one of the things about the male psyche is we don't like rejection. And even if our loving wife just doesn't feel like having sex, it still feels like rejection to us.
Mhm.
It's very stressful on our system, no matter how great the relationship is. And so you share with her how good it feels when she initiates, and that's fine if once in a while, you're asking her to initiate. But if it's too much and you're not bringing leadership, I don't have a ton of empathy for the guys. I say, figure it out, man. Suck it up and figure out how to recharge yourself to bring it back to the bedroom.
Awesome. Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that element of like, if you want that to happen, communicate it. And that there's like the way you just shared that of how like the value that brings to somebody and the connection that you feel as a result of that, I think is a really great way to reach a woman and inspire her to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And hearing you talk, one more thing come up. You can lead, but not lead, so guys, it can be like, baby, I'm going to lay down and I want you to give me a back rub. Like you're sort of commanding her to pamper you.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to lay back and you blow me. I hope I can say that on your show. I want to sit back like a fucking king and you service my cock, like you can just give that command and then kick back and be like, service me, woman. And, I'm using that language in the context of sexuality and
yeah.
So, I mean, there's creativity here that the man can bring, and he doesn't always have to do everything, but he can just give a few commands, and then part of the role play is that he's going to kick back and be serviced.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, I love that. Thank you for adding that on. Okay, well, I know that you have so much knowledge. You've written books. You have all of these incredible programs and retreats that you've been a part of, and I'm wondering if anyone is listening, where they could find you and connect with you if they want to learn more or move forward with you. Well, Jess, thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing. I know it's just the tip of the iceberg of all of your insight, and I'm excited to hear about what else you have to come. So thank you again for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure, Kirsten.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of The Naked Connection. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss another episode. Trust me on this, your sex life and that special someone in your life will thank you for it. And if you really love the show, please take a moment and leave a 5-star review or a written review and let me know what you think. It would mean so much to me and this show. Until next time, happy connecting.